Hello, everyone. I'm Ashley Sellers, speech language pathologist and owner and operator of Speech, Language, and Beyond. I am so excited about the information that I'm about to share with you all today. And I know you've already seen the title, so we are talking about articulation today. And we're talking about it in terms of what it is and how we would describe it when we talk about it as a disorder. Let me also give this disclaimer as well, because in my recent research that I've done for this video, based on our national organization, which is the American Speech Language Hearing Association, they are not technically referring to it as an articulation disorder anymore, even though when I was in school, that is what I was taught. They're giving it a bigger name, which is a speech sound disorder, and it is an umbrella of different things. And I will explain that to you a little bit more. So you may hear it called an articulation disorder, or you may also hear it called a speech sound disorder. But either way, we're pretty much talking about the same thing. Who is this video for? It is for the parents of children who may be currently experiencing this. I want you to have an understanding of what you may be hearing coming from your child. And if you were or already have taken your child to a therapist, that when they begin to speak with you concerning their progress or whatever the case may be, then the terminology that they're using is not going over your head. If they were to go as far as to show you any diagrams, then you can be pretty much familiar with what they're talking about. It is also for any student of the profession right now, whether you are in an undergraduate program or a graduate program, or if you are an active therapist and you are currently maybe just wanting a refresher or maybe studying CEUs that have something to do with it, everyone can benefit. I'm excited about the video because by nature, I'm a true nerd. And so when I went back and I did the research for this, I got excited because it took me back to everything that I learned in school. And so it also allowed me to know, like, do I still know this? Is it something else I need to brush up on? So it was also helpful for me as well. But you will be able to use this video as a way to understand what is going on with your child's articulation skills and know some things that you can do to help them. And also, I find that a lot of my parents blame themselves for why their children may have this, and it's not your fault. Okay, it's a motor disorder, but we will get more into that later. And I also want to say, as I release this video, I'm also running a 40% off sale on all of my articulation disorder products that I have that target articulation in my Etsy shop. This will run for the next 2 weeks or so. It probably will end either the week of Christmas or the week after, but I will be running that on my website. I will attach a link within this video where you can find it right now. For anyone who has purchased any of my products directly from my website, it is not up right now because I'm in the process of redesigning it. So it's been down maybe for about 2 weeks now. And so I don't think I had plans for it to be back by the 10th, but I've been taking on some other things in addition to trying to do these videos. So I haven't quite been able to get it back out there, but I'm hoping by the end of the year that page will be back up where you have the option of you buying them and me emailing you the workbook, or you downloading it directly from Etsy, which is the sale that I'm running. So I want you to take advantage of those products as well. And please look at the end screen of this video, all of my interactive videos that I have that you can sit your children directly in front of to target some articulation issues as far as specific sounds and things of that nature. Those will also be in a playlist for you as well. So you can click them and find them, and you can sit your child in front of it. You may want to sit there with them for a little while, but you can sit them in front of it and it will give them the help that they need. So I hope this video is helpful to you. Let's get right into it. I'm excited to
Okay, everyone, let's get right into it. You've already seen the intro, so you know what to expect. And so I want you to do exactly what it says on the screen. Keep calm and love speech therapy, because you're about to get ready to learn everything that you need to know about articulation. I got your back. Ride this out with me so that when you're done, you come out feeling more knowledgeable than you did when you came in. Trust me, it's going to be worth your while. So first things first, if we are to know what an articulation disorder is, first we must know what is articulation. It is simply how sounds are produced when speaking. Articulation is directly impacted by the articulators. Don't let the word scare you. Once I show you what they are, then you will be very much familiar with what I'm talking about, and it will begin to make more sense. So the articulators, they have to come in contact with each other some type of way, and when they do, it can cause constriction of the vocal tract. Depending on how constricted or not constricted the vocal tract is, it will determine whether or not you're going to make a vowel sound or a consonant sound. Then once we get into producing vowel sounds and consonant sounds, then we have to think about voicing. Now, this is not something that we will focus on very heavily, but what you need to know is that most consonant sounds come in a pair. One sound, and the reason why I say they come in a pair is because you'll have two consonant sounds that are made in the same place. We'll get there to let you know what I mean. So, for example, if we take our T and our D sound, these two sounds are made the same exact way with the parts of the articulators that we use to make the sounds. But the difference is one is voiced and the other one is not. If you were to take your index finger and your ring finger and put it in the middle of your throat around the area of your Adam's apple, and you were to make the T sound, if you do that, you're not going to feel any vibration of your vocal folds. If you were to take that same method, put those two fingers by your Adam's apple or on your Adam's apple and make the D sound, D, 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 you're going to feel the vibration of your vocal folds, and that's all voicing is. It is the vibration of the vocal folds. So that's very important to keep in mind. All right, you're sticking in there with me. Let's keep going. So going back to our definition about what is articulation, we said it's simply how you're producing sounds. Well, we produce sounds using our articulators. So as you can see, the articulators has to do with our nasal cavity. It has to do with our lips, our teeth, our tongue, our throat, which we refer to as the pharynx, and our larynx, which is where our voice box or our vocal folds are. All of those things, and it also has to do with our hard palate and our soft palate, which is pretty much the roof of your mouth, okay? And then there's a part of the palate that's directly behind your teeth, like a little ridge that we call the alveolar ridge, and the tongue often will come in contact with that to create different sounds. So basically, it's the thing that you use to talk and eat with every day. Those are your articulators, okay? Now, you may not have known prior to this video that there are sounds that we make by funneling air through the nose, through the nasal cavity. And so those particular sounds are your M and your N. If you were to say those sounds now, that same vibration that you would typically feel in your throat, you can also feel that in your nose. So that's important to point out. So the articulators are the things that we use to eat and to speak with every day. But if you're not in the profession, you would not have known that or how it relates to how we speak, okay? And that is also why speech language pathologists are qualified to work with feeding and swallowing, because we're using the same thing that we speak with in order to chew and to swallow our food. So that's very interesting. Something else that you need to know as well. Speaking has a lot to do with your air buildup, all right? So the air that you build up in your lungs, your diaphragm, all those things help to contribute to how we speak. One of the very first things that we were taught in our anatomy and our physiology classes were the same system that we use for breathing. We are also talking and eating on top of that same system. So just see how that just shows you how intricate the development of the body is, because we're still able to talk and eat and breathe all at the same time, but if we were to break that down, once people start to have difficulty with aspirating when they eat, all of that, those things come in together. If there's a loss of coordination between speaking, eating, and breathing, then yeah, you can have some food that will fall back into the lungs to cause aspiration. If a person is unable to get their tongue up enough to produce certain sounds, will that also impact their ability to be able to use that same tongue action to propel food back to start the swallow? So all of those things are somewhat interrelated, okay? So that's just something to think about. You're doing well. Keep it up with me. Let's keep going. Now, if we were to go back to our initial definition of what is articulation, we said it is how sounds are produced. It has something to do with the articulators and how they come in contact with each other, and the constriction of the vocal tract or the airflow that we have. It will determine whether or not we're making vowel sounds or consonant sounds. So look. On this particular picture that I'm showing you, I'm giving you the layman's terms or definitions or pictures of what vowels and consonant sounds are, because it will be easier for you to understand. But I will show you later how we learn phonetically what vowels and consonant sounds look like. But let's pay attention to the definition that they give us of vowels. A vowel is a speech sound made by allowing breath to flow out of the mouth without closing any part of the mouth or throat. And that is true. It is basically that typical thing when your doctor says, say, ah. When you open your mouth and you say ah, air is just flowing through your mouth. That's all it's doing. It's not being restricted in any way. There's nothing that is cutting it off. But what you will learn later on is that if you're probably saying to yourself, well, if it's simply just opening your mouth, then why do we have 5 different vowel sounds? Because you can still shape a vowel sound depending on how high or low, if a vowel sound is made at the front or the back, or if it's made in the middle of your mouth. And you can still do that without any restriction from your teeth, your tongue, your throat, or anything. So it's a, e, ah, ooh. If you do that, it's simply just depending on how high, low, front, or back is your mouth moving for those sounds to be able to come out. But there is not any restriction. So I hope that makes sense. Now, to contrast that, a consonant sound is a speech sound made by partially or completely blocking the flow of air through your mouth. This is where the articulators come in. So they show you on this chart the 26 alphabet sounds that are represented. Now, like I said, when we're taught this in our program, this is not what we're given. We're given these sounds phonetically, but I'm showing it to you this way because it's a lot more simple to understand. So, for example, if you were to make the b, 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 b sound, that is not the mouth open without anything blocking it. You're taking your top lip and your bottom lip and you are pressing them in together to get that sound. B, 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 b. That is some form of constriction because the airflow is being blocked and it's being shifted another way in order for us to get this sound, if that makes any sense. Let me give you another example. Let's go over to your F sound. So when you make that sound, you're taking your top teeth and you're placing it slightly on your bottom lip, and you're also getting somewhat of a fuzzy sound. So it's that is restricting the airflow. If we go back to a vowel and it says when your mouth is open and there's nothing interrupting that flow of air, you are constricting your vocal tract when you take your top teeth and you put it on your bottom lip to make that sound. So to make it short, vowel sounds, there's no constriction to airflow. There's no constriction to the vocal tract. Consonant sounds, there is constriction to the vocal tract because it has to do with where you are placing your articulators. So for example, for your B sound, your bottom lip and your top lip are coming together to create a sound. For your F sound, your teeth is making, your upper incisors are making contact with your lower lip in order to make that sound. So this is where the articulators begin to come in. So I hope that makes sense. It was a lot. You're hanging in there. You're doing a great job. Let's keep going. Okay, so I'm going to break down for you now phonetically what we were taught that vowels look like. Now, when you look at this diagram of the vowel quadrangle, doesn't it look different from the way that vowels are presented to us in written print when we're not learning about them phonetically? So what you see here is a diagram of the mouth, the same way that we saw it with the articulators. If you notice the quadrangle that's towards the middle of the mouth, that shows you where our vowel sounds are made. Now, I hope that I did not cause any confusion when I told you that vowel sounds are made with the mouth open with no constriction with the vocal tract, and that is correct. But I don't want you to think that there aren't any articulators that are used with the production of vowels. The difference in how they are used is the fact that it doesn't restrict the airflow. So for example, let's break that down in a way where it's common sense. So the main articulator for vowel sounds are the tongue. But in this instance, the entire tongue is either low in the mouth or it is high in the mouth, but the tip itself is not moving. Once we get to the tip of the tongue moving, that's causing a restriction of air, where that air either has to go around or some type of way or go over the tip of that tongue. But we don't find that here. It's the entire tongue itself either going up towards the roof of your mouth or down or staying lower towards the floor of your mouth, okay? Or we're not talking about the individual movement of the back of the tongue, because there is also causing some type of restriction between the back of the mouth and the throat, and that's when we get into the production of other types of consonant sounds. So the primary articulator for all vowel sounds, it is the tongue. And the way that vowel sounds are produced has a lot to do with the height of the tongue. All right. And so, as you can see with the quadrangle, there are some vowel sounds that are in front of the quadrangle. That shows you some of our front vowel sounds, okay? And then we have some in the middle, those are your central vowel sounds. Then we have some in the back, those are your back vowel sounds. Another articulator that is also used with our vowel sounds are the lips. Typically, you will have some vowel sounds that require some type of lip rounding. And even with this lip rounding, it is not enough to necessarily cause a constriction in the airflow. It just impacts how much open or not the mouth is to help to determine how that airflow comes through. So there is more that I could tell you about vowels, but I do not want to confuse you. But I want to leave you with this one last thing. Vowel sounds can also be tense, and they can also be lax or whatever. So if it's tense, it's just saying that when you make that vowel sound, it's more of a harder, more stressed vowel sound. And most times, if I'm not mistaken, when you are making more of your tense vowel sounds, I think you're going to get a little bit more tongue height. When it's a little bit more lax and it's stressed and it's not as hard, then you're going to get that tongue height that's lower to the floor of the mouth. So that's just something to remember in regards to your vowel sounds. And I just wanted to show you how drastically different vowel sounds look phonetically, the way that we're taught them versus the way they are presented to us in print, okay? Now we are taking a more in-depth look at consonant sounds. When we are taught them as a part of our profession, this is how it is presented to us phonetically. But don't make it harder than what it really is. Okay, so for example, where we see the P and the B sound, we're taught them as P and B, as bilabial sounds, because we're using both of our lips to produce that sound. Or where we see our T and our D sound, they are made with the tip of the tongue touching the alveolar ridge, which is one of the things that we saw on our articulation chart. So with the lips being folded in, that's the restriction of the airflow. It's causing constriction to the vocal tract. With the tip of the tongue tipping towards the roof of the mouth behind the teeth on the alveolar ridge, that's also causing the airflow to be restricted a certain way. If we move down to where I guess we see the S and the Z. Because I don't have my pointer, I'm not pointing out ones to you that you can't see with the pointer. But with the S and Z, it is the same thing. It is an alveolar sound, but there is also causing some airiness, like the S and the Z, that little airy fuzzy sound is causing the airstream to come out a certain way as well. So all those things cause constriction to the vocal tract. So I just wanted you to become familiar with, if you were to ever see any of your child's work transcribed, like when we're giving them an articulation exam, when they make a sound incorrectly or they substitute one sound for another sound, we use our phonetic symbols to let us know what their speech system is telling us with how they're producing sounds. So if you were to ever see any of your child's work transcribed, in order for a therapist to explain to you what your child's speech sound system looks like, then by looking at this, it will kind of give you understanding of what those transcription symbols or those phonetic symbols, what they mean. All right. Look at you. You're hanging in there, and you know what? You're doing a great job. We're almost through the first portion of this video, and we're about to get to the part that we all really want to know about, which is what an articulation disorder is. But we said in order for us to know that, we have to know what is articulation. Let's review. Articulation is how sounds are produced. They are directly impacted by the articulators. The articulators are our teeth, our lips, our tongue, the hard palate, the soft palate, the pharynx, the larynx, all those things brought in together, and how they come in contact with each other in order to shape the vocal tract. We said that if there are vowel sounds, there is less constriction to the vowel tract, because what's happening is the airflow is not being blocked. The tongue is either moving up in the mouth or it's down towards the floor of the mouth, and there may be a little bit of lip rounding, but for the most part the mouth is open enough with no restriction for the air to flow through. But then with our consonant sounds, we get restriction when we are creating sounds where both of the lips are being pressed in together to make a sound, where the tip of the tongue is going up near the alveolar ridge and blocking the way that air comes out. These are causing restrictions to the airflow, which is the production of consonant sounds, okay? And we talked about how consonant sounds look different when they are presented to us in print versus how, as speech therapists, how we learn them phonetically, okay? So now let's get into what exactly is an articulation disorder. Now we have a firm understanding of what articulation is. So since we know it to be how sounds are produced when we're speaking, when articulation becomes impaired or it begins to be looked upon as a disorder, we simply turn that around to say it is the difficulty or inability to produce sounds correctly when speaking. These are the things we need to consider with an articulation disorder. It is incorrect sound production that can occur at different levels. We will talk about what those levels are. It is also incorrect sound production that can be specific to a group of sounds. Remember how I told you before that most consonant sounds are in pairs, and they are in pairs depending on where they are produced or what articulators we are using to produce them, or what type of constriction it is actually causing to the vocal tract, okay? And then incorrect sound production can be described as different error types. All of these things are considered when we are talking about an articulation disorder. And like I've said many times already, when we were in school, around, well, for me personally, I entered into my program in about 2003 or 4. At that time, we were still referring to it as an articulation disorder. But based on recent research that I've done, they're kind of doing away with this term and they're putting it under the umbrella of a speech sound disorder so that it can cover more than one thing. You may even see it referred to as a phonological disorder, which kind of plays into the articulation, but that's something totally different. But I just kind of want to give you this basic definition of what an articulation disorder is. Let's keep moving along. All right, you guys, so let's deal with the first part of the definition of an articulation disorder. We said that it is the inability or the difficulty of producing sounds incorrectly when you're speaking. So there are levels to articulation. You see them here on this chart. You have isolation. That is when you are saying the sound by itself. It is alone. You're not combining it with any other consonant sound or vowel sound. It's simply if we decided to make the k sound on its own. This is the lowest level. If a child is unable to make a sound when it is being produced alone without any other sound, then before we can move on to anything else, we have to make sure that they're able to produce that sound alone. Once the child is able to do that, we're going to go from the isolation level to the syllable level. Now here is when we get into combining consonant and vowels. Syllables can be produced at different levels. You can have an open syllable. If it is an open syllable, it ends with a vowel sound. It can be a closed syllable. When it is a closed syllable, then it's starting with a consonant, vowel, consonant. You're closing it off with another consonant sound. Then syllables can be one syllable words, or they can be multi-syllable words. That is when you begin to add more than one vowel in between consonant sounds within a word. A child has to also prove their level of accuracy with the different types of syllables as well. Then once we feel comfortable in syllables, then we get into words. It's the same thing here. Most times your syllables are going to be maybe nonsense syllable words, words that really aren't real, because we just want to make sure that they're able to alternate between consonant, vowel, consonant in order for them to maintain their level of intelligibility. But then with words, it's the same thing, but instead of us focusing on the sound itself, now we're listening for the sound at the beginning of your word, which we call the initial word position. Or we're dealing with that consonant sound in the middle of the word, which we call the medial word position. Or we're dealing with the sound or the consonant sound at the end of the word, which we call the final word position. So a quick example of that is if we're going back to our K sound, can we say it at the beginning of a word when we hear it in cat? Okay? Can we hear it or say it in the middle of a word if we have a word such as kicking, where that K sound is in the middle? And then can we produce that sound at the end of a word when we hear it in bike? So you had K at the beginning, K in the middle, and K on the end, okay? So once we get through the word level, and word levels can also be a part of doing multi-syllable words depending on where that sound falls. So you will also get into syllable production of sounds within words at the word level as well. Then phrases is when you take that problem sound, such as the K sound, and you put it at the beginning of a word, in the middle of a word, or at the end of a word, but you put it in a short phrase. For example, see the cat. When I put those other two words in front of the word cat, can I still maintain the K sound? Okay, go, cat, go. That is another way that we can use it in a phrase. Then we also have sentences. That's when you take the word cat and you put it in a complete sentence and make sure that they're able to maintain the production of the K sound in the word cat. The cat is black. Are they able still to maintain it when it's in a full syllable? Then structured speech is when we set up a type of speaking activity where we're trying to direct exactly what it is that we want you to say. It's almost like we're trying to get you to talk from a script or to get ask you questions that we know will give us a certain type of elicited response to make sure that we can still control how you're producing sounds in your words. And then from there, it's just conversation. Just pretty much how I'm talking to you now. Am I still able to maintain the production of my K sound among other sounds and you still be able to make out what I say? Now, I know that was a lot, but those are the different levels of articulation. Feel free to go back and review this area again because this is the heart of your therapy. This is what's decided. What sound are we saying incorrectly? What level do we need to practice this sound on? Okay, and the goal is to take you from the isolation level to the conversation level. And everything with this is not necessarily cut and dry because I can have a child that comes in my office and they can make the K sound by itself. They just lose it when it's in a syllable. Or I may have a child where, okay, they can make their K sound in isolation in a syllable, but when they start to put it within words, they're losing it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody that walks through my door, that they're all going to start at the isolation level. Now, sometimes we will start the child there because we know that's where they can find the most level of success in those initial sessions, and we want to build up their confidence before we get them in words. Even though testing showed us that the word level is where we need to start, we will always start them somewhere where they can have the most success and then move into the area that we know they need to really work on. Okay, stick in there. You're getting it.
Now let's talk about the place and manner of articulation. Now, as you can see, these two things are listed on this chart, and they are broken up in a way for you to be able to understand what we mean by each one. Now, of course, as I've said before, I'm presenting this information to you in the way that it was presented to me when I was a student of the profession in order to give you a better understanding that when these types of things are being used, then you know what your speech therapist is referring to or what they are talking about. So let me, I guess, create a simple way for you to be able to understand place and manner. So first, let's start with place of articulation. That simply has to do with the articulators, as we've already discussed what they are before. This tells us where the airstream is being constricted. So if we start here with place of articulation where it says bilabial, that only means that we're using both of our lips, the top and the bottom, and we're pressing them together. When it says labiodental, labial stands for your lips, dental stands for your teeth. So you're taking your top teeth and you're putting them, or your upper incisors, and you're putting them on your bottom lip to create the sounds f and v. If you go a little bit further where we see interdental, that's simply saying that we're taking our tongue and we're placing it slightly between our teeth to get what we know as the TH sound. The TH sound can be voiced and it can also be voiceless. So hopefully by now you're getting my drift. So the place of articulation is just the place in which the articulators are meeting to create a constriction, okay? Now, the manner of articulation simply has to do with the degree of constriction. That degree of constriction will determine exactly what these sounds will sound like once that constriction is made. And we have 6 manners of articulation: stops, fricatives, affricate, nasal, lateral approximate, retro approximate, and a glide. And then you can also, as I said before, your sounds can be voiceless or voiced depending on if there's some type of vibration with the vocal tracts, okay? And so a stop is simply saying that when you create these sounds, there is a stop in the airflow when you make those sounds. And then we've also referred to P's and B's as plosives, because once that airstream is stopped and you produce that sound, there is a plosiveness of air that comes after the sound is made. A fricative sound like F, V, voices TH, voice TH, S, Z, and SH, it's that little airy, fizzy sound that you hear when you make these sounds, and it's easier represented in the S sound. See that airiness and that fuzziness? That's the sound that you get from most fricative sounds, okay? So basically, that is the difference between place and manner of articulation. And I hope this is something that you understand. I hope that it is increasing your knowledge so that when you hear these terms, you know exactly what it is they're referring to. So place of articulation is where the articulators are meeting to create a constriction. The manner of articulation has to do with the degree of constriction when these articulators cause one to happen. What is the degree of it? And it determines what the sound itself sounds like or how it's produced with the articulators. All right, so let's keep going. We're almost to the end. Everything that we've discussed up until this point leads us to the types of articulation errors. And I say that because as a speech language pathologist, when a child comes to my office as having a suspected articulation disorder, these 4 errors are what I'm listening for to determine where they're having difficulty and if there is a disorder to be diagnosed. So for example, an omission error is when a child leaves out a sound or a syllable in a word. So let's take the word goat. The word goat is a 1-syllable word, but if the child was to leave out the g sound at the beginning of goat, that is an omission error because now they're saying oat instead of goat. That is an omission. If a child was unable to produce a word such as kicking, kicking is a 2-syllable word. If the child was only able to say kick and they needed to say kicking and they could not get the ing in kicking, then that is leaving out a syllable in a word, okay? An addition error is when a child adds an extra sound or syllable to a word. If that sound or syllable was not already there, then they've added it and it makes it hard to understand what they're trying to say. A simple example of that is if a child was to try and add a s sound in the beginning of the word goat. So they're saying goat instead of just saying goat. They're adding an S sound in there for some reason. And if you're talking to this child in everyday speech and they were to add goat to a word in their sentence, it's going to make it hard for you to understand exactly what it is that they're trying to say. And by any means, that's really not a common error, but that's just the only way I know how to put it to you to give you a vivid example. A distortion is when a child is able to mostly produce a word correctly, but there's just one sound they can't get correct. And you typically can hear that when a child has like a lisp.
So it's like, it's not so much that you can't hear the S sound, but it's being distorted because the tongue is attempting to go through the teeth when it shouldn't. Or there's a little bit more slushiness to that sound than what it should be, but you're still able to make out the word or the other sounds within that word that the child is trying to say, but that one sound is sticking out. And then a substitution error is when a child is consistently, and that word is important, substituting one sound for another. Like a common substitution error is a child doing a D sound for a G sound. When they're unable to get the back of their tongue up for the G sound, it's easier for them to get the front part of their tongue up. So that's where that D sound comes in at. So you may ask yourself, how does this lead back to everything that we've already talked about? I will tell you how. Because if we go back to the G sound, let's just consider the place and the manner of articulation. So most G sounds, if we talk about the place of articulation, it has to do with the back of the tongue making contact with the roof of the mouth. So first of all, if the child is leaving G out at the end of a word, if they're consistently substituting that G sound with the D sound at the beginning and the middle, that shows us that a child has omission and substitution errors with that particular place of articulation, which is G. Most times they will also have it with K, which is made in the same place, but there's a difference in voicing that occurs between the two. Now, if we take that a step further and we talk about the manner of articulation, then that's when the K and G, they fall into the stops. So stops is when the airstream stops and there's a plosiveness that happens when you make the sound. So if we notice that with K, with G, with P and B, then there's another pattern that's being set here. So does that make sense? We have to know what articulation is for us to know what it is not in order for us to say that it's a disorder. So I hope that that makes sense to you. If you need to stop the video right now and go back and review what we've already went over to help you get understanding, that is perfectly fine. It is my goal to make sure that I'm presenting the information to a parent that may need to have a discussion with the speech therapist, that if these terms come up, you know what they're talking about. For a new student, you're trying to understand it in class, I'm trying to break it down to you in layman's terms. Even if there's a teacher that has a hard time understanding what a child is saying in your class and you don't want to have to keep asking them to repeat what they say, this is also for you. Okay, so we have one more key point that I want us to discuss, and then we'll be at the end. I think you've done such a great job holding on thus far. All right, you all. So we have pretty much come to the end of the road with this, but there was one last thing that I wanted to discuss with you, which are phonological error patterns. Now, these are typically found in children, I would say between 2 and 5 years old, and after 5, they should begin to um, disappear. You may even hear them as early as, 12 to 18 months, depending on how advanced your child's ability to use words is at the time of, them developing speech. And so basically a phonological error pattern is what we call a phonological process. And that is when a child takes what they hear in what I call adult language and they simplify it because they are unable to coordinate all of their articulators enough to say every sound or syllable that they hear in a word. So they do a watered down version that is easier for them. It makes it less complex. So if we look at the first one here where it says fronting, that is a K with an arrow that points to a T. It's kind of what we talked about earlier. When a child is unable to make a K sound, which is made towards the back of the mouth,
because the back of the tongue is making contact with the palate. If they can't do that, then most times they will take that back sound and substitute it for a front sound, which is a sound that's made towards the front of the mouth using the tip of the tongue, which is T. So we call that type of phonological process fronting. So for an example, instead of them being able to say cat, they say tat, because that K sound is hard to do. Instead of them being able to say goat, then they say dote, because they're unable to get the back of their tongue up, and it's easier for them to move the tip. Now we can also reverse that process where a child can get the back of their tongue up, but they're having difficulty getting the front of their tongue up. So instead of them saying T, they say key. Instead of them being able to say door, they say gore. So it's like they can't make the sound towards the front of the mouth, but it's easier for them to make the sound towards the back. So there's a reversal, and this phonological process is called backing. All right, so another example is stopping. So of course, if we go back to that place and that manner of articulation, there are certain sounds that we identified as stops because of the stop in the flow of air when these sounds are produced. So the child has difficulty making the S sound, which is a fricative sound. Remember, we talked about that has to do with the manner of articulation. It creates that extra fuzziness in the airflow. So a child can't make the S sound that we hear in the word sock. So they're going to say talk instead of sock. They're going to substitute that fricative sound with a stop, which is why we call it stopping. And last but not least, we have deletion. And in this particular instance, they're showing final consonant deletion. So instead of saying the word cat, we get cat without the T. All of this shows a. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope that this video, it will be one of these videos that is added to your list of videos that you will save and you can always come back to when you want to understand more about articulation and how it may be impacting your child. Please share this video with others that you feel may need it. Please subscribe to my channel, Speech Language Beyond, and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Until next time, everyone, be blessed.